What's going on, Johnny Nation? Welcome to episode 158 of the Eye of the Storm podcast. My name is David Barham, and we've had some time off lately, so thank you for returning. It's been a good time to step back, keep an eye on the off-season happenings, but focus on some other things besides St. John's basketball. But that hiatus is over. The Red Storm roster has 13 players on it, handful of new faces, a few returnees, and a whole lot of excitement and, of course, expectations. National media is falling over themselves to talk about St. John's and the team that Rick Pitino and his third-year staff have assembled. So let's dive into it all. And nobody more fitting to discuss it than friend of the program, St. John's assistant coach, Bob Walsh. Bob, welcome back. Hopefully you've had some time to recharge, but it's about time to get things moving and shaking again in Queens.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dave. It's good to be with you.
Bob, just to briefly touch on last season, given how well the year went, winning the conference, winning the Big East tournament, winning the first game in NC tournament history for St. John's in 25 years, fans getting to see the behind the curtain with the docuseries on Vice TV, for yourself, knowing that winning is the only option, the expectations of success, how difficult was the outcome of the Arkansas game, given how things were clicking up until that point and the high hopes everybody had, and have you watched the game back since?
It was obviously extremely difficult. Um, the expectations were real. It wasn't built on, just sort of hype. The run we had 21-2 versus Big East competition, we had lost by like a total of 6 points in four games, winning the regular season and the Big East tournament championship in the fashion we did. We thought, obviously, as a two seed, you're in a position to do some real damage in the NCAA tournament. But it's interesting. There's no focus beyond getting out of that first weekend. Obviously, it was Omaha, and then it was either going to be Arkansas or Kansas, assuming we could take care of business with Omaha. We did. But it is a two-game, grind for your season to try and get through. And, I would say the success that we had overall, after you look back a couple of days later, makes a loss like that a little bit easier. Not that losses are ever easy, but like we had a phenomenal year. There's only one team that's really, really happy at the end of it all. We thought we were good enough to be that team. So, but yeah, it stings. It really, really hurts. I mean, how many times, I know in my career, how many times are you on a staff? How many times as a player, for a Zuby or an RJ or, a Davon Smith, Kadari, those guys were in their last year in college, some of them playing in their first ever NCAA tournament. How many times you have a legitimate chance to go win a national championship? So losing is really hard. We also had just an incredible group of kids, like high character, fun to be around, great to coach. So a big part of the disappointment is that night in Providence, realizing like, wow, we don't have practice tomorrow. We don't have a game to go prepare for. So it stings a lot, but I think if you can keep it in perspective a few days later, you realize we had a fantastic year. The energy, the support from the fan base, the way we went about our business, how hard we played, the types of kids we had, it all added up to just really a special, special year.
Were you even able to take a second to kind of step back and realize what you did in the season, or was it just right into recruiting and building the new team because it seemingly, started to come together quickly?
Well, I think you can do both. It's not like you go on vacation for 2 weeks and sit in the Bahamas and, reflect on how you played or how many games you won after the season is over. You do get right into recruiting because obviously the portal is open, and quite honestly, I think it's better. It gives us more free time later in the year when the roster is set, and the guys aren't, our guys are done with finals. They're not back for summer school yet. You get a little time to breathe. So, but it's not like, if we had nothing to do the day after the season ended, you'd sit there and you'd feel miserable. So in a way, it's good. It's right to it. A lot of the success that we had helped us with recruiting.
Yep.
So I think you're able to do both. You reflect on the season, but you still have work to do.
St. John seemingly struggled with Arkansas' size and physical play and had a very cold night offensively. I'm curious if the staff looks at a game like that, an outcome like that, and takes some of what happened into the meeting rooms afterwards to decide how the rosters should be constructed moving forward.
For sure, every game exposes some flaws, and I think the biggest flaw for our team, especially a team as good as we were, was the way we shot the ball all year. So that is certainly talked about all year. It didn't come back to haunt us in a lot of games. Obviously, we only lost five of them. We were able to kind of out athlete, for lack of a better term, a lot of the teams in the Big East when we didn't play very well offensively, when we weren't shooting the ball. We got to the offensive glass, we forced turnovers, we increased the pace of the game. We got so many more shots up than our opponent, which led to, winning margins for us. So, but absolutely, you take the flaws. Now, if we had beaten Arkansas and lost in the Elite Eight and shot 10 for 22, but still lost to, say, Texas Tech or someone like that down the road, we wouldn't have sat there and thought, okay, well, we don't have to worry about shooting next year, you know? But obviously that got exposed in that game. We weren't able to overcome it. And yeah, you talk all year, quite honestly, about the guys you're going to lose, where we need to fill in, what we're looking for skill wise, what we're looking for athletically, what we're looking for position wise. So the day after the season is just kind of a continuation of those conversations, and it's ramped up because now it's time to go get guys.
You talked about guys like Kadari, Davon being in their last college games, RJ as well. How much do you guys talk about the NBA with the seniors and guys who are trying to make that decision? Last Wednesday, RJ made the decision to stay in the NBA draft. Aaron Scott, Kadari Richmond, and Davon Smith are all getting workouts with NBA teams, participating in combines, whether for the G League or the agency. How much does the staff check in with the guys during this process after the season ends? How much do you guys talk about or try to help them plan, which route and how they should attack things? We saw clips of Kadari Richmond last week, who has a completely looking jumper and a three-point shot now. Aaron Scott has a ton of NBA interest, already had workouts with the Warriors, Mavericks, and Wizards, and still has Brooklyn, Toronto, Atlanta, Detroit, and Boston on his schedule.
Coach Pitino talks about the NBA with the players a lot throughout the year. He knows that that's the ultimate goal for almost every one of them. So, he talks about the things that NBA teams are looking for as a group. Uh, and obviously, he also has individual meetings with the guys who are either in their last year or could potentially be, high draft picks, like an RJ who had a decision to make. So, um, it's not like as assistants, we're talking NBA with the guys all the time. We're really talking about development and mentality and what they need to, get better that day. But the end coach talks about stuff honestly and openly. He knows they want to get to the NBA. He talks about the flaws that'll keep you getting, from getting there. He talks about his experiences in the NBA and what it's like to be in an NBA workout and, how much they're going to want you to shoot the ball and how you got to, approach that. So the conversations, that's part of just the relationship and what coaching is today. As they're going through it in the spring, we're always checking in with them. You reach out and agents are calling us, front office people, assistant coaches that you might know in the league are calling us, hey, Kadari is coming in. Hey, I want to ask you about Aaron Scott. Does he have a chance? So, and you check in with them constantly. You let them know, hey, the Wizards called today. I heard you're going down there tomorrow. Good luck. How you doing? So, it's a big part of the process. It's their dream. It's one of the big reasons they come to St. John's and want to play for Coach Pitino. So, it's not like the NBA is something we wait until the season is over to talk about. Coach Pitino addresses it with them with his experience as a coach and with NBA players. I think it helps them throughout the year.
In this transfer portal era where there's so much turnover, you're obviously having to juggle infusing and integrating new talent with a few of the guys that stick around. But as coaches, and for you specifically, How much do you value and appreciate the guys who see the big picture, see the long-term plans and buying into development? Coach Pitino has often mentioned how he misses developing a group like Peyton Siva and Russ Smith from day one and seeing it out till the end and getting those fruits of your labor. Zuby, who is going into year three, is seemingly like Haley's Comet today in college basketball, staying with one team. Ruben Prey coming back for year two. Lefty coming back for year two. Sadiku coming back for year three. And somebody like Kelvin Odih, an incoming freshman who specifically mentioned the multi year development plan in Queens and knowing that he's here for more than one season.
It's an interesting question. I would say this, everybody has their own journey, and I wouldn't say I appreciate the guys who see a big picture or maybe a long-term plan more than other guys, because that would be, taking away from those other guys and what they have in front of them. It may be in their best interest to keep moving. I mean, you mentioned Zuby. You got to remember, Zuby came to us as a transfer, right? I mean, he left a national championship program and came to play for us. So um, it's just part of the deal now. The change, the freedom that they have, the ability to make money, the power that they have in the transfer portal to go when they want. So I don't really look at one or the other as better or worse. For certain guys, they're in a great spot. They want to stay. They love playing for coach, and they think St. John's is the best fit for them academically and basketball wise. For other guys, maybe it isn't. We all have different opinions about each of those guys and whether it's the right move or not. But ultimately, I just appreciate the connection that you make with the players, whether it's a guy who decides after 2 years, comes into the office and says, "Hey, I think it's in my best interest if I move on," or a guy who says, I definitely want to come back. Um, a genuine developed relationship allows you, hopefully, to stay connected with those guys who are trying to make the best decisions for their future. So, the guys that stay, it's awesome that they do. I do love the fact that, like, I see Sadiku every day, like somebody like that who, just absolutely loves being with us, has a smile on his face, is bought in as a captain, is a leader. But I also stay connected to the guys who decide to leave and feel like, it's probably in their best interest to go somewhere else. And ultimately, if the relationship is genuine, that sticks. Hopefully those guys know that we've helped them get to where they go. And it's another thing Coach P is great about. He's not bitter about guys that leave. He's not angry, or saying, well, you shouldn't do this or you should do that. He's there as a guide and he's willing to help and he's making them better. And that's what we're all trying to do.
Speaking of Coach Pitino, last Thursday he tweeted, and he's talked about it before, about how you guys watched the Thunder and especially on defense and how they rotated, how they helped on defense. I think you and I spoke about that on the podcast as well. The talk coming into this season with the new group is that they're going to be a better offensive team, specifically shooting the ball. Offensive firepower coming in with Bryce Hopkins, Ian Jackson, Oziyah Sellers, Joson Sanon is very obvious. In the same vein, the defense last season was second in the country for a majority of the year. What is the plan to address the defense? How do you as a staff balance teaching offense versus defense in these summer workouts that are set to begin in the next few weeks?
It's interesting. We've had a few laughs this week with how much film we watched of the Oklahoma City Thunder this year. And I got to give Coach credit. He was telling us, like, in December, that Oklahoma City was going to win the NBA championship. And we were like, I mean, at that point, it was like, come on, Oklahoma. Yeah, they got some good young players, but now it looks like he's probably right. We talked about it actually last night again. So they are really, really connected defensively. And that's always been Coach's point when we watched the film, was watch no matter what happens. Here's a breakdown. Look at how they help each other. Look at how they rotate. Look at how they finish. So um, I think the mentality defensively is something that's really important over the summer. And I think we got there last year. Obviously, I didn't think we'd be the second ranked defense in the country, but that was what carried us. When we had bad shooting nights, when we struggled to score, when we were down double digits in the first half, we locked in and got stops. So it is a balance in the off season. You want to get guys out there offensively and get a flow there and get them comfortable with each other. But ultimately, I think we proved this year that defense is something that travels, and defense is something that you can count on every night. Um, and that's the challenge over the summer, is bringing the guys together to understand that, working on positioning, working on rotations, staying connected, guarding the basketball so you don't have to rotate. That'll be certainly a big emphasis this summer. But the offensive chemistry has to be there as well. So we want to maintain an elite level defense, but also try and improve offensively. And hopefully we have the talent to do that.
One of the biggest splashes in college basketball was Ian Jackson committing to St. John's as he transferred from North Carolina. Perhaps a similar sized cannonball was Coach Pitino saying, "We have big shoes to fill at point. Kadari and Davon were awesome. The ball is now in the hands of our next great point," referring to Jackson. Bob, what will be the biggest challenge for Ian Jackson in his conversion to a point guard, as he's mainly played off the ball and a two guard in high school and at UNC? How do you go about teaching someone how to play such a vital role in practice? Is this perhaps a assignment for assistant coach Talik Brown as well, who was such a great point guard at UConn?
I think the challenge for all of our guys, with hopefully the level of talent that we've been able to bring in, and was certainly the case this year, is sacrifice, right? Is making each other better. Not everybody's going to play the minutes they want. Not everybody's going to get as many shots as they want. Not everybody's going to score as many points as they want. There's a level of sacrifice that we have to be committed to the team to be really good. I don't know how much, quite honestly, I can specifically address Ian Jackson. I've never coached him. Obviously I've watched him play. I saw him in high school, watched him on film. He's very talented. So I don't know that it would be very intelligent for me to sit here and say, well, here are the specific challenges that he's going to face. I will say overall, when you have a bunch of guys who are used to having the ball in their hands and making plays and being maybe the guy or one of the guys, like a lot of these guys have been, getting them to connect and really just make the right play, right? And not specifically with Ian, but Bryce Hopkins, Zuby, these are guys who are both first team all league in the Big East in the past. When the double team comes, get rid of the ball. When the gap closes, spray it. And I think that'll be a challenge for all of our guards. I think it'll be a challenge for Ian. It'll be a challenge for Dylan Darling, who averaged 20 points a game last year. Just the cohesiveness on offense, sharing the basketball, being unselfish. I thought Aaron Scott was really good for us last year, because I used to say, Aaron, one of the best things you do is you just hang out on the other side of the floor outside the 3-point line and wait for the ball. He's not coming, we're not crowding the ball. And so we need guys to do that. And I think Ian is extremely talented. He's going to play a big role for us. He's certainly going to have the ball in his hands. But that challenge for him is the same challenge it is for everybody else, is understanding when to make a play for yourself and when to get the ball to your teammates.
I think it's interesting you say that, because Davis Jenkins, I think, echoed those exact words in how he had to learn the position, was learning when it was his time to go and try to get a bucket. And when he kind of figured out that balance of facilitating versus scoring or making a play. That's interesting. And that's really where the basis of my question is, because Ian is known as the guy who makes the play. He's the guy since high school, probably since AAU ball when he was a little kid, that was always able to make that play. But now he's going to be relied upon to make everything connect and everything go. And I'm just curious from the coaching perspective, how difficult it is necessarily, forget about Ian, let's not put a name on it, but to teach that position, how, and, we talk about the quarterback being such a vital piece in football, shortstop in baseball, that center position that has the ball in their hands. How difficult is it from your coaching, perspective? I mean, Bob, you've been everywhere for a long time. I mean, to teach that position, to teach the mentality of a point guard.
That's a great question. My experience is that most great coaches that I've been around or I've learned about are really, really hard on their point guards, right? Like that's kind of the extension of you out on the floor. So for any guard who's going to have the ball in their hands a lot, understanding the head coach and what his non-negotiables are, so to speak. Like some head coaches are, hey, maybe there's a few more turnovers, but you're going to thread the needle on that, cross court pass, and we're going to get a layup. Others are going to say, hey, take care of that basketball. That's like gold. Like I don't want any turnovers. So um, understanding what Coach Patino is looking for on offense for all of our guys is certainly an adjustment. Um, he really wants you to get rid of the ball as soon as it's time. You know what I mean? Like you drew the defense, you've done your job. We have a couple of sets that we run a lot where it's like the first action is, somebody coming off a screen and then it's just immediate throw it, like get rid of it. Like we're not looking for you to see if you can make a play here off this screen. What we're looking for is the spacing over there. And you mentioned Talik, and I think that's really, really important. Like Talik is a guy who won a national championship on an elite team for a Hall of Fame coach
Mhm.
where everybody had to sacrifice, right? I guarantee you Talik could have scored more points in college if that was his focus. So he is really, really good. And Ricky Johns is as well. Ricky Johns was a great player. Um, so, you know, they're really, really good with sort of the mentality at that position. And not only their experience as elite players, but also now Ricky was more of a scorer. Let's not
Yeah.
get it, but he was a guard who played at a high level and understands what coach is looking for from the guards at that spot. So I think um, you know, the experience of the coaches helps with that. We have a pretty good understanding of the demands that Coach Pitino puts on his guards. Our players are going to have to get used to that, and that's what the summer is really, helpful for.
You brought up plays, so it just triggered in my brain another question. How much is the offensive play calls and perhaps defense, but I'm a little bit more focused on offense. How much is that going to potentially change given the personnel? I mean, is it just you guys have your base nucleus of plays that you want to teach and hammer home, or are things going to change this summer and, going to whip out the notebooks and the dry erase boards and, start drawing up tons of new stuff for the type of talent that is now on the team. Guys who are elite shooters like Joson, Sanon, Oziyah Sellers, Ian who could shoot it at a 40% clip. Bryce who can hit a three as well. We'll get to him in a second. But I'm just curious, how much the offense changes based on personnel versus some tried and true stuff that you guys like to work in over and over.
There's a little bit of both. There are some actions that, we've run since I've been with Coach and that, he really likes that will be consistent. One of the good things about the summer, and I think we did a good job of this last summer, we played a lot of 4-on-4
Mhm.
last summer and just got comfortable, let the players get comfortable with each other. And we got a good read of what we had. Like, wow, Davon Smith is really explosive, like you can't keep Kadari out of the paint. Aaron's really good on the weak side, step in threes, that kind of stuff. So there'll be a significant amount of change. I think we will look at our personnel and what we're really good at and what kind of combinations we may have on the floor. When you had Aaron Scott at the four, some of your stuff was second action for him, maybe coming off a flare screen or getting a pin down for a shot. Bryce Hopkins, while he's a capable shooter, maybe is a guy who's going to go downhill more. He's a guy you might post up more than Aaron Scott. And if he's playing the three or the four, we have to look at some actions for that. So it does change a significant amount with regard to our personnel because we have to look at, what our strengths are. And, we'll probably have better shooting in the backcourt. You'll probably see more stuff to get action for jump shots for them. So the summer is a good sort of test period for that, where we're putting in some stuff, but we're also evaluating the skills of our guys and what we need to do to score.
All right, you brought his name up twice now. Believe it or not, it seems like Bryce Hopkins is often forgotten about when people are talking about St. John's this summer. Perhaps because he's only played 3 games last year and he's coming off of an injury, but by all accounts, he's healthy and he's going to be a big time contributor. Just today, he was in the gym with Kelvin Odih and Joson Sanon in Providence with Nick Correa. His sophomore year at Providence, he was an All Big East member, routinely averaged 17 and 8. What do you see Hopkins' role in? I know you just touched on it a little bit, but what do you see his role being at St. John's? How excited are you to see him and Zuby clean the glass together, play that inside out as both have shown the ability to also step out and start hitting the threes? And, how much versatility does a player, a high level player who is proven to be at the very best of the conference, well, what does he give you guys?
I'm thrilled to have Bryce Hopkins. I actually coached him at Providence for a summer and a month, basically, for 4 months when he first transferred in. So I never coached him in games because that September was when I left to join Coach Pitino's staff at Iona. The first thing is he's such a great kid. I mean, he's such a great teammate, humble, hardworking, and his talent is unique. I mean, he is a skilled, wing forward who's built like an NFL linebacker. Who can play the power game when he gets going downhill full speed, he's almost impossible to stop. So um, I was really excited when he came in for his visit and he worked out and just being on the floor with him for 40 minutes. I forgot kind of how much fun he was to be around and how good a kid he was. And then the talent just speaks for itself. I mean, he can be an impact guy in the Big East. He's already proven it. He can rebound the ball at an elite level on both ends of the floor. He can play in the perimeter. He can play in the post. He can push the ball in transition. He can guard just about every position on the floor. He makes his teammates better. He's unselfish. So he's certainly not being overlooked within our office
Of
and
course.
the impact that he can have. And he is really, really eager to get started, to be a part of what we're doing, which is great to see. A lot of guys are, and part of that is the energy coming from last year and obviously playing for coach. But I think Bryce and Zuby, you saw how hard it was for teams to match up with Zuby last year, just from a physicality standpoint, his ability to get out on the perimeter, facilitate the offense, but then impossible to stop on the offensive glass. And now you throw somebody with the brute force, athletic ability, and strength of Bryce next to him. That could be a really, really tough combination for us.
Do you see, and I know this is kind of maybe a tough question to ask now, could Bryce play the five and Zuby possibly, play the four? I know Bryce has played some small ball five at Providence, but like, and coaches mentioned maybe some, Zuby 4 times. So could they play, basically swap positions and, run the offense interchangeably? We talk about positionless offense often with St. John's.
I don't know if I would say they would swap positions if they're out there together, but Bryce certainly gives you the opportunity to run him to the rim.
Okay.
If he's the first guy down in transition and be your first post, especially if he's got more of a 6'6" wing on him, as opposed to a bully 4-man. So, I don't know that. I mean, look, I think Bryce could play any position on the floor, really. Like he could bring the ball up and initiate your offense if you wanted to. You can get him off screens and get him shots. So, the best thing that a guy like Bryce has is he can guard the people who can't guard him. And I think that's one of the best things you can look for as a basketball player and maybe as a tweener, right? If you're quick enough to guard the little guys, but you're strong enough to bully them, and you're strong enough to guard the big guys, but you're quick enough to go by them, you're a pretty tough matchup. So uh, Bryce's versatility will certainly be a factor, as it will with a lot of our guys. We've got some size at the wing and the two spot with Joson and Oziyah. So I don't know that, you definitely say, oh, wow, Bryce is playing the five here, but he'll get some buckets posting up, running to the rim, I'm sure. And the versatility and size of all those guys, I think, makes us dangerous.
It's like you're going down my little shot sheet here. Joson Sanon and Oziyah Sellers. Two great offensive threats, two guys I'm super excited about. Joson, potential NBA guy. Oziyah has a really well-rounded offensive game that he really polished last year at Stanford. I think both of these guys come in, immediately help St. John's in the three-point shooting department. Sanon is one of the most hyper athletes St. John's fans are going to see. His trainer, Nick Correa, who I mentioned is working with two of the other guys right now, has said that he is the best athlete that he has coached and trained. Sellers is great moving without the ball as well, getting to his spots. When you guys were scouting these guys and seeing how they would be fits on the team, what was it that sold them as two guys that you wanted to add?
In simple terms, it's probably two things: talent and shooting ability. I mean, obviously, we wanted to make sure we had a better shooting team this year, as that was an Achilles heel for us a bit last year. And both guys produced, at a high level, at the Power Five level. Um, a little bit different. I think Joson's probably a little bit more of a younger, athletic type, can guard multiple positions. Oziyah is a big time shooter with good feel for the game, smart. And again, versatile. Like I could see with their size, you could see them guarding smaller or them guarding bigger. Could they guard a four-man, a face-up four if they had to? Could they guard a point guard? Bringing the ball up, I think they could. So, but their combination of talent, production, and the ability to shoot the ball, I think, is what really attracted us to them in the recruiting process.
Were you there for Oziyah's workout with Coach P?
I was.
Coach P said it was one of the greatest offensive displays he's seen.
He made a lot of shots. He made a lot of shots. Actually, we were talking about it just the other day, because the way Lefty shot the ball in our workouts at the end of the year, and we were, coach was saying, who would you choose? Like, and we were kind of going back and forth. You're talking about guys who, when we do like we have a 25 shot drill that we do twice, so it ends up being 50 shots. You're talking about guys who make like 44 out of 50 3-point shots, or maybe even 46, but are routinely making 41, 42. So,
So wait,
yeah,
so was that
Oziyah,
debate between Oziyah and Lefty? Or was there somebody
that
else in
that
there
was
too?
that was the conversation we were having the other day.
Who are you
Yes, was like,
picking?
hey, who would you take?
Who are you taking?
I had trouble. Like right now, I'd probably give Oziyah the the edge in a game because Oziyah's got more game experience than Lefty does. Um, Lefty had some unbelievable workouts for us, especially in the spring, as he got more comfortable, quick release, catch and shoot, where again, he's routinely making, 80 to 85% of his three-pointers and drills on the move. So we kind of ended it as that'll be a fun one to watch, because coach loves competition. So the workouts with four guys will end up with, all right, you two down here, you two down there, and then it's like, all right, first to seven from this spot, alternating, and it gets pretty competitive. So we'll parse it out
All right.
in Taffner and in Carnesecca over the summer, I'm sure. But look, I remember when Oziyah was in, we kind of joked like, wow, it's good to see the ball go in like that,
Ouch.
just kind of joking about how much we struggled to shoot it this year. So
Yeah,
I think he can have a big impact. And I think Joson can as well. Joson,
for
as
sure.
a younger, high schooler, I was up in Providence. He's a Fall River kid. I actually
Mhm.
coached a few guys from Fall River when I was at Rhode Island College, but he was more of an athlete. To see as a freshman how well he shot the ball, he is a rabid worker as far as improvement. So he obviously worked on his jump shot throughout high school, and both of those guys I think can have a big impact for us this year.
Speaking of athlete, Dylan Mitchell might be the most freakish athlete in a St. John's uniform in a long time. And we talk about what Davon Smith did last year, being 6 foot, but Dylan Mitchell's 6'8", 6'9", and can run the floor like a gazelle. The guys that we've talked about so far are predominantly offensive threats. Meanwhile, Mitchell is a defensive force who can run the floor like a guard. What enticed the staff about Mitchell? And we talked about Bryce and Zuby together. You throw in Dylan Mitchell there in St. John's front court, it's going to be tough to play against.
His versatility, his obviously his athleticism, you talked about it, his motor, his unselfishness. He was the kind of guy that he does not need to have the ball in his hands to be really good. And I think those guys are good to have. And that's not to say he's not talented. I mean, he's an elite talent. But he could do so many things that can impact winning without the ball in his hands. He's a great offensive rebounder. He runs the floor. He can create offense with his defense, with deflections and loose balls. He's versatile. He's another guy that like you could see different combinations. Once we kind of figure out what we could have a really big lineup out there. And Dylan Mitchell could guard, most three men in,
Yep.
in the Big East. He can probably guard most two guards. Now maybe he's not going to chase a driller off of screens, 25 feet from the hoop, but he can keep the ball in front. He can defend. He's a ferocious rebounder. He's a great athlete. I think in our press, he's going to be a real impact guy. So, and he just has an unselfish approach, which I really like. So, I'm really excited to see how he can impact, the team with his versatility.
He's not necessarily the shooter that Aaron Scott was, but do you think that he kind of slots into that Aaron Scott, archetype role for you guys?
From a defensive standpoint, I think so. Definitely. A little bit different offensively, as he's
Hmm.
more a guy who's going to get downhill and, he'll make an open three with time and space. Whereas Aaron, we were running stuff, to get him off of screens and quick release shots. So, but Aaron was such a key, like glue guy, defender. He was one of those guys, Aaron, at the end of the year, most of the year even if he was having a bad shooting night, it felt like we couldn't take him off the floor because of the way he defended and he moved the ball and he did a lot of good things. And I do think Dylan Mitchell has a lot of that understanding the game and impacting the game outside of scoring the way Aaron did.
You mentioned hypothetically, I guess, the Wizards calling and asking about, somebody coming in for a workout. Well, Aaron's workout with the Wizards, I'm told he was, quote, elite defensively and got rave reviews from the Wizards staff. Bob, you brought up Dylan Darling earlier. Dylan Darling, somebody that won Big Sky Player of the Year, averaged just under 20 and 6 a game. He'll serve a vital role in point guard depth. We're talking about Ian Jackson's transition, but Dylan Darling is somebody who plays the position and played it very well last season. Kelvin Odih, a top 75 freshman who prides himself on being defense first. Imran Soljanovic, another incoming freshman from overseas who's been labeled a great shooter. And Anjay Tamba, a 6'11 big man who averaged 10 and a half and 8.9 rebounds per game, almost 2 blocks per game in NAIA. Where do Darling, Odih, Soljanovic, and Tamba fit on this roster coming into the summer?
It's a great question, and I would say to you, to be honest, I don't really know because we've got to get this group together.
Yeah,
We've got to get them together in the middle of June and see. Dylan Darling, they're different, obviously. Like, Imran, Odie, Tamba, they haven't played at this level the way Dylan Darling has. Big Sky, but he was also at Washington State
yep,
2 years, actually played for Kyle Smith, as
sure.
Oziyah Sellers did as well. Kyle and I went to college together, and he's one of my closest friends in the business. Um, I think those, so it's all different. Some of it will just be in general, will be depth. I love Dylan Darling's skill with the basketball. He is a true point guard. who is a baller. I mean, he is a dog. He is not just your typical like, oh, he was a mid-major kid who kind of gets the ball to the right people. I mean, he can get into the paint. He makes
Mhm.
plays. He's tough. He's athletic. So I like his ability to make his teammates better. Odih is a guy who I was thrilled when we got him, a Providence kid who I've known for a while, who's just another, he's got a lot of what we just talked about with Dylan Mitchell. Like he is an athlete who defends and makes things really hard. Offensive skills are coming along. He's got great potential there. But I look at him as a guy, and maybe those two, when they're going up against Ian Jackson and Oziyah Sellers and Joson, they are up in their shorts, 94 feet, making those guys better. Imran comes with great reports from people that I know that I trust as far as his offensive game, good size and can shoot it. So obviously provides some depth there. At what level? I'd be lying if I told you, I knew that because I've got to see him out there. We got to work with him. We got to get him in the mix with those other guys. Ultimately, with all four of those guys, Tamba as well, we needed to make sure we had better depth. We had a couple injuries, and one thing people won't remember from this year, Brady, Dunlap, Jaden Glover were two of our best shooters. And they ended up basically sidelined for the second half of the year. And that had an impact as well. Like, I think you're going to see those guys, in a couple of years, like, wow, they had pretty good careers as college shooters. So um, hopefully we have more depth. We've got some youth in there. We've got some attitude in guys like Kelvin, Odih, and Dylan Darling, who are like something to prove guys. And I think the end result is it makes practice really, really competitive, which will make us better as a team.
Regarding the returnees, Coach Pitino tweeted his improvement areas for four guys that are coming back. Ruben, he said he wanted consistent jumper. Lefty, explosive first step and talking. Zuby, consistent arc on a 3-point shot. And Sadiku, ball handling and one-on-one moves. Is there anything that you would add to each of those?
That's probably all of it from the offensive end. I think on the defensive end, all of those guys can get a little bit better. Zuby, obviously had the most game experience and was pretty good at switching pick and rolls and keeping the ball in front. But being able to guard on the perimeter a little bit, Ruben as well, keeping the ball in front. Lefty and Sadiku both being able to dog the basketball, keep it in front. But yeah, and then I would say ball handling skills, like you make a big leap in college when you go from just being a one dribble guy who can make a straight line drive to the rim to being able to handle it against pressure or make multiple moves. And I think for all of those guys, all four of them, getting a little bit better at being able to make a move facing the hoop that's more than just one dribble or a straight line drive will add to their game. Now, do we need a lot of that out of those guys? It's not like we're trying to turn Zuby into LeBron James, but it will make him certainly a better player and more of a threat if he can face the basket and handle the ball a little bit better.
Well, speaking of Zuby, he's somebody who very well might be preseason Big East Player of the Year, might be in the All American conversation, and is being talked about as an NBA draft prospect next year. He's the captain of the team as well as Sadiku, and he's going into his senior year and his third with this program and staff. What's the plan for Zuby? What do you want to see from him this season? How vital is it for him to put that C on his jersey to the test in showing all the newcomers what is required to succeed at St. John's and for Coach Pitino, especially coming off a 31-5 season and a season where expectations, like I mentioned, are very high?
He doesn't need a C on his chest, even though he certainly earned it, because you learn what it takes from Zuby just by being in the gym with him. And what he added last year was being a little bit more vocal and not accepting stuff that he didn't like, or maybe, a lazy effort here and there in practice. And, he was the guy in huddles saying, like, against Creighton, like, hey, fellas, 8 minutes to go. It's a Big East championship. Like, let's go. Like, dig in. No more, mental mistakes. No more confusion on screen. So, I don't know that Zuby needs to necessarily. I don't need to see anything more out of Zuby other than him continuing to get better because he kind of added that comfort level with leadership. We talked about his skills that need to get better. He's just a dream to coach, a dream to play with. He just everything you see and everything the fans love about him, that's who he is every day. So um, now he's got to handle the spotlight a little bit more. He certainly wasn't the number three hitter in the lineup, so to speak, going into the season last year. And now, obviously, everybody's going to be making sure that they try and contain him. But it's funny, they knew how good of an offensive rebounder he was, by midway through the year. They still couldn't keep him off the glass, like the effort plays that he makes. So um, I just think more of Zuby being who he is and continuing to grow and get better will have a huge impact on our program.
Bob, the non-conference schedule is starting to come together. Some monster opponents already announced. Alabama at Madison Square Garden on November 8th. Three big games around Thanksgiving in the Players era, which could possibly see St. John's play Auburn, Iowa State, Michigan, Tennessee, Houston, Gonzaga, or more. December 6th, St. John's will play Ole Miss at Madison Square Garden, and possibly the non-conference game of the year, St. John's versus Kentucky in Atlanta in the CBS Sports Classic on December 20th. What was the thinking behind this strong non-conference schedule, one that may be, depending on how it breaks in the Players Era tournament, perhaps the best non-conference schedule in program history?
I don't know what the thinking was because if it doesn't work, I'm probably going to lose my job. So whatever the thinking was, I don't, I can't really explain it. No, look, scheduling is a really interesting art and science. Obviously, ultimately, you're trying to prepare your team to win the Big East. But the old days of winning a bunch of bye games and going 500 in the Big East and getting into the NCAA tournament are over, right? And the Big East has shown that. So, um, you know, our conversations with regarding the schedule was trying to make sure we challenged ourselves with some quad one or, maybe quad one neutral, quad one, quad two home. We knew the MTE in Vegas would be very, very strong. Um, and ultimately, look, our schedule last year, if we hadn't run the table in the Big East like we did, 21 and 2, our schedule probably wouldn't have helped us. We didn't end, Kansas State didn't end up being as good as we thought. It wasn't necessarily a quad one game. We lose that game to Baylor, and now we don't play Tennessee. We play Virginia, and Virginia doesn't have the year that they're
Right.
expected to have. So you have to be really in, intentional and specific about it. And our goal talking about it was to try and, we also got less quad one games in the Big East regular season last year
Right.
than we did the year before, right? I tell this to everybody. The thing about 2 years ago, when the conference only got three bids, we had nine teams that were in the top 75 in the net that year, which means every one of those games on the road was a quad one game. This year we didn't have that. So really, it's about trying to get as many quad one opportunities as we can that won't hurt you if you lose, but will help you if you win. Now, you have to balance that with, having some home games. You have to balance that with, um, the number of league games that you're going to play and the challenges there. The garden dates, TV, all of that stuff plays a factor into these games. But ultimately, what we're looking for is to try and get, maybe four quad one contests out of our non-conference schedule. If four of those, six or seven so-called big games end up being quad one games, that's going to make our schedule really strong with the Big East, and hopefully put us in a position, to get a really good seed in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and hopefully St. John's obviously wins a few of those really big ones and starts building that hype on this season that starts second game of the season with Alabama. So wasting no time, really easing into things there, Bob. Bob, I'm going to end it with a nice and easy one for you. National pundits and college basketball enthusiasts, when trying to find something that may hinder St. John's, have said a few things. The lack of a true point guard and needing Ian Jackson to become what Rick Pitino said he will be. There's only one ball for so many guys who need to score. What's interesting is if you look back to one of Coach Pitino's amazing teams, the 96 Kentucky team that won it all and sent 9 players to the NBA, they also only had one ball. How do you manage expectations in house? How do you get these guys to all buy in and play their role? And how does St. John's ultimately and hopefully get to the second weekend and beyond of the NCAA tournament with a team that is projected to start the season top 10, if not top 5?
Here's something probably people don't know about me, but I don't really pay attention to college basketball in the off season. But like I really don't care. Like when these guys, the media and they call it, hey, what's your starting five going to be? And just off the record, where do you think you fit? And what's your biggest weakness? And like we're going to get the guys together on June 16th. I mean, I've never coached Ian Jackson or Dylan Darling, or Dylan Mitchell, it's just so to answer that question, what's it going to take? And is that like, I don't really get into it in the off season. Like, I like the talent that we have. I think we have a chance to be good. I know there's going to be a lot of hype. Ultimately, how do you get them to buy in? I will say this, like it's inherent in everything that we do. And it starts with Coach Pitino and through everyone on our staff. Like this is about the team. Everything that we do is about building a team. And coach always says this, like everybody will get what they're looking for as far as their individual career and their chances in the NBA and all that if we win. That's how you get those opportunities, right? So, not to say it's easy to do, but we don't sit there, when the guys are coming back in mid-June and go, okay, guys, man, we got a challenge. Like he likes to have the ball. He likes to have the ball. Like ultimately, good players are players who play the right way. There aren't too many talented players who are big-time players who don't know how to play the game the right way. Now, maybe they need to be sort of led in that direction or coached that way. So, everything we focus on will be about what's best for the team. And that's coach's approach. That will then get you what you're looking for individually if we win. You look at what happened last year, and it was a testament to that, right? We won at an elite level. Zuby's first team All League most improved player. RJ's an All American. Both of those guys, by the way, were academic All Americans. Even if you look at some of the guys who had chances to go elsewhere, like you don't think their stock was improved by the fact that we were 31-5. So winning is the ethos of the organization, and preparing to win is what Coach Pitino is about every day. When he sets that mentality, our guys understand what it takes. Now, it doesn't mean there aren't going to be bumps along the way or there aren't going to be challenges, but the hype in the off season and what people think, could bring us down, like that's really not a factor. I don't pay attention to it. I think we've got talent. We've got a chance to be good. When we get the balls out on June 16th, we'll start building a team. And that's one of the things I love about coaching. And I love the way Coach Pitino does it. So team first is inherent in everything that we do. And I think great players like to fall into that type of mentality.
Bonus last question. I think I know the answer to it, but any pressure trying to outdo or live up to the now additional eyeballs thanks to 31-5 this year?
The pressure question is a great one, and it's really interesting. Working for Coach and just the approach of our program, the pressure is inherent every day. It doesn't matter. Like it wasn't like I guess maybe last year you felt it a little bit. It's like, okay, hey, we didn't go to the tournament in our first year. Man, we really need to get the tournament. But like the pressure within our program every day is this relentless will to get better, to improve. Like, what are you doing to help the team? What are you doing to make yourself better? And everybody feels that. So is there going to be quote unquote pressure on the outside, to live up to what we did and maybe we're top 10 or whatever? There is, but if when there was none of that, like we didn't feel any different going into our first year, right? With coach, you're going to have a big spotlight. He is going to drive you with high standards, and that's really the pressure that we feel. I will say this. I look back and I'm like, dang, people think we're going to be better. We went 31-5. We went 21-2 against the Big East. We were a 2 seed. Like, man, that is a lot. But again, day to day, you get better every day. We've got talent. You feel that type of pressure, and ultimately, at the end of the day, hopefully we will be where we want to be.
Second bonus question, and then we're getting you out of here. Tomorrow, June 4th, we're recording this on June 3rd, but June 4th, Coach Pitino is throwing out the first pitch at Yankee Stadium before the game. Bob, is he throwing a strike?
You want to talk about pressure. All right. Zuby went out in Citi Field, and Zuby had never thrown a baseball in his life. And he threw a little get me over changeup right down the middle to John Franco. So um, I think coach has to match Zuby. So I'm gonna say, yeah, he's gonna deliver a strike, probably with a little more heat than Zuby, so that he can make fun of Zuby for throwing a changeup at Citi Field.
Looking forward to that. He's assistant coach Bob Walsh. Thank you as always for joining us. If you are looking for some summer reading on the beach or on vacation, I always do this. I did this last summer with Bob. Bob has a great book entitled To Nothing. It's a book about building championship culture, leadership, and what kind of an attitude it takes to reach the highest levels that can translate from the court to real life. You've heard me and Bob now for a few years on this podcast talk about some of these lessons, and you could hear him speak about it, but he has put pen to paper in a tremendous book. And so if you need something to read, and it's not just about basketball, it's lessons that you could take into the workplace and throughout your life. So that's entitled To Nothing by Coach Walsh, and highly recommend everybody check that out. Coach Walsh, best of luck this summer getting this team ready, and we'll all be counting down the days until November 3rd, where St. John's opens the season against Quinnipiac in Carter Arena.
Appreciate it, Dave. Always a lot of fun to catch up.
Thank you so much. Johnny Nation, it's good to be back with you. Appreciate you so much. And we'll be back. We got a bunch of episodes coming up as this summer rolls on. Johnny's get back to work in the gym in just a few weeks, and we'll see what happens and how St. John's lives up and tries to do better than 31-5, as you heard Bob Walsh say. Hey, it's going to be tough, but you know what? If there's anybody that can do it, it's these Johnnies. A tremendous roster is in Queens, and we'll see how it all comes together. Johnny Nation, thank you for listening. I'll catch you next time.